Greetings and welcome back to LA Quill. Today we're diving into chapter 34 of Arianna's tale. Arianna struggled to free herself from Icon's strong grasp. While he didn't have the strength or the training of his cousin, he was still larger and quite a bit stronger than she was. It was a hopeless battle from the beginning. She knew that, but it didn't stop her from trying. She'd keep trying to escape him until she either succeeded or died in the attempt. Her betrothed's cousin had appeared next to the bed, stepping from what had appeared to be a slit of darkness in midair. Arianna had recognized this thing from Damuk's descriptions as a portal. She'd been semi-asleep, and Icon hadn't even given her a chance to scream, to summon the guards at her disposal and save herself from him. He'd quickly muffled her words with his hand and sent a red mage bolt flying at Lenora, causing her to fall to the ground when she tried to protect her mistress. Then he had retreated back through the portal with his captive, all in an instant. There had been no time to summon help. Now Icon was wrestling her down a corridor of green marble, lined with padded benches and several doors. There were dozens of lovely tapestries hanging on the walls, all of them depicting lush green countryside, verdant forests, and glittering oceans. She only noticed these things because Icon had finally pulled her to a stop before one of the many doors. Her fear increased tenfold. Icon knocked but didn't wait for a response. He opened the door and forced her inside. He was anything but gentle, and Arianna was sore enough that a tear escaped from the corner of one eye. She had been determined not to cry, but there was no hope for it. As Icon pushed her before him, her eyes moved to the woman seated at the table near the expansive windows. Arianna wasn't at all surprised to see Cybil. Icon would never have acted all on his own. He didn't have the audacity or the intelligence, but Cybil was malicious and clever and fully capable of anything. That, more than anything, was what really frightened Arianna, making her tremble inside. Cybil smiled. "Don't worry. We have no intention of hurting you." She laughed at Arianna's look of disbelief. "Oh, it's quite true, but I will admit that it wasn't always the case. You see, I now want your baby to be born." Arianna's eyes grew wide. "Why?" she whispered, afraid she knew the answer. She fought the urge to truly tremble in fear. She had never been so afraid, not even the night Damuk had raped her. Cybil's smile became cruel. "I'm going to keep your child, raise him as my own. He'll be the legal heir to the imperial throne, as Icon is to the Republican throne." She laughed again at Arianna's surprise. "You didn't know? Icon is the eldest son of Cadfael. He's now the heir here, and by here, I mean Scytha, of course. That fop Darian is nothing more than a courtier now." Arianna almost spoke, almost said that Darian was her brother, but this was information that Cybil did not have. She was almost certain of it. And while Arianna couldn't see how that could help her right now, she needed every advantage she could get. Finally, she said only, "What will you do with me?" She tried to sound defiant and confident, but instead sounded tired and defeated. Arianna was simply too afraid to mask her emotions. Cybil shrugged gracefully. "For now, you will remain here in this lovely room." She waved her hand at the virtually empty chamber. "You will have everything you need, including the services of a midwife. Eventually," she rose from her chair, "I might send you back to your lover, after Icon is finished with you." She laughed at the abject terror in the girl's eyes. It would be pleasing to see Damuk's prized slave in Icon's possession. She decided then that she would watch the pair abed, when the time came. It would give her pleasure to watch the pain and fear that would consume the slut. Icon released her, and the two of them headed toward the door. Cybil turned back one last time. "Make yourself comfortable, my dear. You're not leaving this room for a very long time." Candle marks later, Arianna stood at the expansive windows of the barren chamber, wondering what to do. She had spent a great deal of the afternoon crying into the single pillow on the tiny bed, and now the sun was finally setting. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass. There was no way out of this room. She'd tried. The door was securely locked, and even if she'd known how to pick locks or had anything to use as a lock pick, there were guards outside. The windows were nailed shut, and the glass was so thick she doubted she had the strength to break one, even if she did have something light enough for her to lift that would do the job. Besides, she was on the 3rd floor, and the drop was too far, even if she hadn't been pregnant. She was no acrobat. No, she was stuck in here, with no way to get a message either to Damuk or to her brother. She saw a Firebird swoop down and land in the tree next to her. It seemed to stare at her for a moment before turning its attention to the small berries growing in the tree. Arianna sighed. If she'd had her brother's gift, she could have spoken to it, asked it to find Damuk, or Darian, or even Tarius. She could have had some help. Instead, she was stuck in this small room, huge but empty except for the small bed, the table, a single chair, and the chamber pot in the corner. She was alone, and had nothing to look forward to except eventual rape by Icon. She'd been raped once, and she didn't think she could stand it again. And she was sure Icon would be even less gentle than Damuk had been all those months ago. Slowly, Arianna sank to her knees. Despairing, she started to cry again. "Are you sure this is going to work?" Tarius asked, pushing aside another branch. These particular gardens were wild and overgrown, exactly the way the king wanted them. They had been Edwina's gardens, and Cadfael refused to have them tended. He seemed to like seeing things that had been hers fall to ruin. "No," Darian answered honestly. "In fact, I fully expect this won't work, but I have to try." He slid down one of the many small hills and looked around, half expecting to see Cybil. Darian had been trying, unsuccessfully, to send a message to his sister for the past few weeks. He had had the message written and prepared, but each time he had approached the aviary to recruit a bird, either Cybil or Icon had intercepted him, and instructed the falconer not to let him send a bird, or to even enter the aviary. He really didn't think they knew what he was about. It was more like they were intent on making Darian's life miserable. And since they both outranked him now, there wasn't much he could do about it. So with the aviary now effectively off limits, there was only one option left. His mother's overgrown gardens were home to most of the Firebirds in the city. They liked the isolation, and no one ever came in here. Firebirds were not a message-carrying breed. In fact, they normally did nothing other than pollinate the flowers and look pretty. Darian was hoping that due to his gift, he could get one of them to carry a message across the Empire. "There," Tarius exclaimed quietly. He pointed to where a Firebird danced among the trees just ahead of them. It was brilliantly colored, mostly a deep gold, but its tail feathers were royal blue and blood red. It gave off fake sparks as it moved, making it look as if the leaves were on fire. Darian extended his mind carefully. He'd not practiced his gift as much as he should have, and Firebirds were touchy things. He sent feelings instead of words, trying to communicate his respect for the creature and the fact that he needed its help, and only its help. He wanted the Firebird to feel needed. The creature reacted immediately. She, he realized, flew out from among the branches and alighted on a statue in front of them. She looked at them inquisitively. Maybe she wouldn't do it, but she'd at least hear him out. That was more than he realistically could have hoped for. Darian sighed in relief and began formulating his message. "This is what I need," he sent carefully, showing in images what he wanted. He'd always been better with pictures than with words anyway. He showed her the Empire and what he thought Crown City would look like from his sister's description. His imaging might be off, but the bird understood. Then he sent an image of Arianna, golden hair, emerald eyes, all her features in intimate detail, down to the tiny creases at her eyes. He was very good at visualization, and this is where that came in handy. "You are fast and smart," he sent. "You can do this." The bird agreed with him, but didn't think it was necessary. This frustrated him. "But I need your help," he said, becoming distressed at the thought that his only recourse was refusing him. He didn't really have any other ideas. So she turned him down. The bird looked at him, and he felt the bird's disdain then. The sensation changed. The bird leapt into the branches above. He felt the urge to follow. "Wait," he shouted, trying to keep the Firebird in sight. She was moving toward the palace. He raced in that direction, Tarius right at his heels. Reaching the palace, he looked up. The Firebird was above him now, looking down at him, waiting. She was on the 3rd floor, perched on a windowsill. Seeing him, she moved over several sills, keeping him in sight. Darian followed. This pattern continued until the bird reached the end of his mother's gardens. Then the bird just sat on the sill, waiting, as patient with him as any good teacher is with a particularly dense student. That's exactly how he felt right now, like a none too bright apprentice. "What do we do?" Tarius asked. He'd never seen any bird act quite like this. It was unnerving. Darian considered the question, not entirely sure of the answer. Finally, he said, "We go up." That was only a guess, but he couldn't think of anything else, and the bird was no longer speaking to him. She was staring down at him, waiting. Luckily, there were trellises lining the garden, so they had no difficulty climbing to the 3rd floor. Pulling themselves up onto the wide sill, they looked at the Firebird. She looked back at them, then turned to face the window, looking inside. After another glance at the 2 men, she flew back into her trees. What was that about? Tarius wondered aloud. Darian was just as confused. "I'm not sure." He looked at the gloomy interior. The sun had set candle marks ago, and inside the room there was not but a single candle. The darkness made it difficult to see the interior of the room. Finally, they saw a small figure sleeping on a bed. It was a girl with hair like golden wheat. After several long moments, Darian shouted, "Ari!" Tarius jerked in surprise. It was indeed Arianna. Together they tried to pry open the window, but quickly realized it was nailed shut. They moved to other windows and encountered the same problem. Tarius hit the window with his palm, trying to wake her. Darian joined him. Slowly, the sound of someone banging on her window brought Arianna out of her troubled sleep. She looked, blinked twice, and looked again. It was indeed her brother, come to rescue her. Crying out in joy, she rushed to the window. Tarius was already attempting to pry open the window. It was nailed shut from the inside, but he hoped he was strong enough to pull it loose. Darian and Arianna spoke to each other, loudly. The glass was thick and muffled their words, but they could still understand each other. They were both sharing what little they knew, omitting rumors or guesses. "Cybil is Damuk's aunt," Arianna was shouting. "She wants to use my child to rule the Empire. Icon took me from Crown City." Darian looked at her in disbelief. "But Cybil is my father's first wife," he replied, raising his voice to be sure she heard him. "Icon is my half-brother and heir to the throne now." "I think I know what's going on," Arianna exclaimed. She was the one with the most information, having lived in Crown City for the past while. If she could tell Darian exactly what she knew, he could send the information to Damuk. "I think—" The door to the chamber crashed open, and Cybil and Icon entered, flanked by 2 guards who had been alerted by all the shouting. Seeing Darian and Tarius, Cybil didn't hesitate. Bolts of sickly red energy flew from her hands toward the window. Arianna screamed and moved instinctively to one side, causing the bolts to just miss her. Darian and Tarius weren't so lucky. Arianna watched in horror, helpless as the bolts passed through the glass, leaving it untouched, and hit both Tarius and Darian square in their chests. They fell from the windowsill into the gardens below, both unconscious. She started to sob. Cybil stalked toward her. "So, you thought to enlist the aid of young Darian, did you?" "I think not." Behind her, Icon was giving instructions for the guards, loyal to his mother, to find the 2 men who were even now lying in the garden. "Please, don't hurt him," Arianna begged. The older woman laughed. "Taken a shine to the lad, have you? Why, how fickle your affections are, my dear. If only Damuk knew." Receiving no response, she smiled. "No matter. You'll not see the boy again." Arianna remained silent, not wanting this woman to know that the boy was actually her brother. Still, the accusation that she'd be unfaithful to Damuk had hurt her. Even so, all she said was, What are you going to do to him?" Cybil began to pace. "I wish I dared kill him. But even Cadfael wouldn't stand for that. No, instead I'll have him thrown in the dungeons. I'll lock him away and he'll be forgotten." She turned once more to face the girl. "Rest assured, this will be the last time anyone attempts to rescue you. I will have guards stationed in the gardens below." With that comment, she turned and left the room, locking the door securely behind her. And that's our tale from L.A. Quill today. If you enjoyed this chapter, let me know your favorite moment in the comments. Until next time, may your stories always be magical.